That I was going to do a video and then I forgot. So before I start my series, I start with this. I had these little notes that I had made when I was writing. This is book 8 of a series. So I had these notes, you know, like, oh, this is the person. Elizabeth from the first book was a guy named Luke's wife who died. And so she had a sister, Annika, and that's what I'm going to use for book 8. And she was kind of a mess, but her sister, who has passed away, took care of her after Elizabeth died. Luke kept sending her money. When he married Mary, the money stopped. And then Annika shows up to try and figure out what's going on. So then we have Ethan Trainer, who has shown up in a couple of the books as a bit part. And so I kind of go into, like, he had this perfect, I said little brother and sister, and I changed it to sister. He had an abusive father who beat him. Ethan didn't stand up to him. He was Trig's old family friend. So I'm putting in just kind of ideas that I had about that. And then I had to write the blurb to put it up on pre-order. So then I had this blurb, right? So I wrote this blurb that kind of gave me an idea of what issues they would be facing in the book. And that was what I had. And so then I sat down and I took, for the series, I had this timeline. So I made a timeline. I said, this is when Mary and Luke met, Amy, Mary's wedding, Trudy, Paul, blah, blah, blah. I walked through Holly and James, Brecca and Rob, James and Holly, all this stuff. So this is basically books 1 through 6. I put all the times on there so that I didn't get confused. Book 7 is a novella, and it kind of doesn't fit with everything else. So then the way that I started is I start with this. So this is Annika, and I sit down now and I make little notes about things I need to change, and then I write down stuff about her character. So I started by saying she's the younger sister. Lizzie was fun and bubbly, and everyone loved her. And then I ended up changing. So I had said older, but I changed it to younger because that's what I had said in the blurb. I wanted to be consistent. And so then I kind of walked through this information about her. Because I'm trying to figure out in my brain, what's her wound? What's her shield? So I go through, she's an author. She met a thriller writer that was her boyfriend, but he does great. And she writes a different genre. And then, you know, she ends up breaking up with that guy. And then how does her brother-in-law fit in, and so on. So then I get a general feel for who she is. Then I try to write down a general feel for who he is. And you can see here, I haven't written down a shield. I don't have that yet. On this, I have for him, his shield is perfectionism, okay? And a subset of numbing. So you've got Ethan Trainer here. I've got his mom was wild in her youth, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of go through all those things. 12 years old, his dad went to prison. He went to live with his uncle. So I'm kind of setting up like what his wound was. And then I know what his shield is going to be. And then I know how he copes with it. And so the numbing is going to be a secondary part of what he does, but perfection kind of permeates every part of his life. He wants to make sure everything's just right so things don't go wrong. And then I kind of walk through like, look, these are the different struggles that he's got. So this is the very first step that I'm taking other than just writing that blurb to get an idea. You can tell I started doing research here to figure out like, where would his dad have gone? Why would they have been here? And then where would they go from there? So then now I've got this. Ethan's wound, mom died, dad abusive, dad in jail, uncle is emotionally abusive. Here's his shield. And you can see here, I shifted it. So originally I was thinking perfection, and then I decided it would work better for him to do numbing and victim Viking. So I changed what his shield was as I developed his character more. So as his dad's career fell apart, I'm getting his wound developed. I'm getting his reaction so I can understand why he's doing what he does. And then here's his misconception. So that comes from Story Genius by Lisa Crone. But basically, he feels like he should have protected his mom and he was a failure there. So now he goes home and feels like he needs to protect his sister now that his dad's getting out of prison. So then I go back to Annika. Now that I've developed most of what I needed for Ethan, I went back to Annika. So now I'm taking the stuff I had before and I'm isolating what are her wounds. She has low self-esteem. Who's she angry at and why? What's her shield? And I came up here now. I was thinking serpentining. I changed my mind. I changed it to foreboding joy. So everything that she thinks is, instead of her putting everything off, I decided to make her someone who always sees the bad stuff that's going to happen. And so she needs to let go of that fear and try to move on. Her misconception is that her words that she writes are not valuable. So what she's been trying to do is write something that she doesn't enjoy writing, that she's not good at. She's been trying to write like literary stuff. And what she's really good at is writing love stories. And so what she has to come around to in the course of the book is something that should resonate with people who are reading this, because the reality is there is value in love stories. A love story matters as much as any other type of literature. And so that's the misconception that she figures out, that hopefully the reader probably already knew and will go, yes, I'm validated in my choices here. And then she also learns to grieve without being so depressed. She's not betraying her sister if she finds some joy or happiness in her life. And then she also, I put in a past wound that comes up at the end. So this will be a plot twist at the end of the book, that when her sister was sick, she could have done an organ transplant, but her sister refused it. And she always felt like her sister did that because she thought she was going to write some epic novel. And it turns out, she finds out from her brother-in-law that wasn't the case. The sister loved the books exactly as she was writing them then. So that will kind of help her find the answer to that misconception. So now you've got the misconception here for Annika that I wrote out again. And then I start drafting. Okay, this is where I start drafting my outline. And all this stuff that's on the side, I added this stuff later. So my original outline was Annika interviewing for a job as a waitress, strengths and weaknesses. She's a frivolous person. That doesn't matter. She binges love stories. So then I'm trying to figure out, like, where exactly does this start? The gap in this chapter is that she doesn't get the job. So she goes in to try and interview for this job, and they ask her that question about what are her strengths and weaknesses. So then I put in, what does she say? She says they're the same thing. And then the gap is that she assumes she's going to get this job because it's a job to be a waitress. And then she doesn't get the job. So now she feels even worse. She can't even get a job as a waitress. So she ends up doing what she vowed she'd never do, which is take on an IP project for writing, which she doesn't even get her name on. And her old agent kept telling her if she ever wanted to make some extra money, she could do this IP project. So she has enough pride to refuse initially, but then she decides, fine. Even though she doesn't want to write rom-coms, even though she doesn't want to write stuff that her name's not even on, she needs money. So she sits to try and do it, and she just stares at the page. And even though she's agreed to this new low for her, she can't bring herself to do it. And so then I go to Ethan. Chapter 2 is going to be Ethan, and I go into the same thing. And so I write in where I think it's going to start, and I do the same thing as you can see for all the chapters. So I went all the way through, and on each of these I put in the gap and the emotional value turn. So I kind of go through each chapter. This is where she submits the project. She hears back from the agent. They don't like the chapters. Chapter 12. Sometimes I give more information. Sometimes I don't. So like this one, chapter 12 is an entire page long. Page and a half. And then here's chapter 13. Okay. And you can see that I start making notes. Now I will tell you that my outline worked great until around here. Chapter 14 is like 2 pages long, right? My outline for chapter 14 goes on and on. But around here, the outline started when I started, or that was 13, still going. So around chapter 14, my outline started having problems. I outlined all the way to chapter 20. Let's see. In my original outline, goes here to chapter 20, okay? But it gets the chapters get shorter because I know that stuff is going to shift based on details that I include. So chapter 19 just says, proposal, high pressure, proposing to a New York Times bestselling author. Chapter 20 just says, the wedding, a whole game night crew in their maybe Halloween clothing or Christmas clothing or something. But that ties back to initial plot point where I put in that there was going to be a contest between some of the other characters at one of the game nights. Anyway, but I don't know what time of year this is going to take place. I hadn't decided yet. And so Annika feels like losing her sister meant that her family was gone. But when she realizes she has this whole new family, and that family is more about, so I have this theme of found family throughout the whole series, so that kind of rolls in, which is why the series is called Finding Home. Anyway, so that wraps into that as well. Well, what I found is around chapter 13, my outline started to get, no, look, it was earlier than that. I thought it was 13. Look, chapter 7, I started to have problems. And so what I did was I took that outline that I had already made, and I rolled it into a new outline. So I took what I had done, and I took the changes that I had made, and I sat down and said, okay, so this is what and you can see my little notes about my word count for the day, but this is where I said I need to reconfigure. So these are changes. So I still looked at that outline for stuff that before I would write chapter 7, I'd look at the old outline and then the new one with my notes about things that I had changed. Chapter 8 did the same thing. You see this little one here. And usually when I reconfigure an outline, my first couple chapters, the outline on those is fairly short because I know I've decided I have to reconfigure. I'm going to write this down so that when I start tomorrow, I don't forget what I'm supposed to be writing. So I write down, okay, 7 and 8. This is what I was thinking today before I stopped writing. Here's 9. Okay, 9 goes on to there. Here's 10. So I reconfigured. Here's 11 starts here at the bottom. Okay, I'm reconfiguring. And then down here, there's still 11. Here's 12. Okay, in a minute, you're going to see there's 13 and 14. Okay, you see that X through there? That changed. So what I had originally put in that outline changed. What I had put in this outline changed. So as my story shifted, I needed to change that outline again. And so what happens is usually I do this on the back. Let's see if I did. Typically, if I have a big change like that, I'm going to rewrite it on the back. Yep. So there's the new 14 because 13 changed. So I re-outlined. You can see, look, there's the notes from 13 when it changed, and there's 14 and 15. I re-outlined on this one. Okay. So now I have 14 and 15 on there instead of here because it changed. So I'm going to look at both of those. I bet I re-outlined on, oh, there's nothing there. But when I go to this one, 17, 18, 19, I bet there's changes on the back. And there are. There's 18 and 19 and 20 because it shifted. So the stuff that I came up with in the original outline, as I write the story, I re-outline so that at all times I know where I'm going now. So that the next day when I go to sit down, and it ended up being, instead of 20 chapters like I had originally outlined, it ended up being 21 because stuff shifted and I had to change my outline to accommodate that. But I always update my outline because I always want to know where am I going and that I have a plan so that when I'm writing smart. What I've found is if I sit down and have a really low word count day, it's because I don't understand how to fix something or I don't know what to write next. When I don't know what to write next, I go back to my outline. I look at my end goal, what my target is, where I am, and what I need to do to get there and why I'm struggling with it. And so I kind of say like, okay, this is boring, or this is unsure, or I need to do research on Ultimate Fighting Champions, which is, the UFC. So that's one of the things that I had to do here. So that's what all this other junk is. This is my timeline for my people. This is my my research on the Ultimate Fighting stuff. So like their different strikes and punches, submissions, their categories. This is my stuff on, like the different fights and how it worked and the words that they used, and how they did this stuff and when it started so that I would understand this stuff and how to use somewhat believable terms when I went in to do it. And then you can see here, I actually had another reconfigure that probably got slid into that other outline. And then these are more terms for Ultimate Fighting Champion. And this is how all the different characters in my series are related. And so anyway, that's what all that stuff is. These are just little notes. I usually have a notepad that I make little notes on. This was actually from Finding Balance, the book before, but I kept it because some of the notes that I had here, they all my stories rolled together. So I wanted to make sure those things were consistent. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of kind of how I build my outline and how I have all this paper that goes into coming up with my story, but it helps my word count be fast.